In class, this video is going to cover Microsoft Excel Unit G. It's using complex formulas, functions, and tables. To begin, we're going to take a look at our objectives. First of which is how to navigate a workbook, how to enter labels and values, how to change columns and rows, use formulas, use AutoSum, change alignment and number format, and enhance a worksheet, and then preview and print a worksheet. So let's move on to slide number 4. So navigating workbook. A few pointers or a few bits of information on Microsoft Excel before we get started. It is a probably, in my opinion, the most important program we cover in this course. It's used to organize and analyze data. It's used heavily in accounting, statistical analysis, data mining, any type of data or calculation intensive work. Microsoft Excel more than likely is used, or some other very similar spreadsheet program. An Excel worksheet consists of grids and rows and columns. We'll show you an example of that in just a second. And similar to a Word table, the intersection of a row and a column is called a cell. An Excel file is called a workbook, similar to how a Microsoft Word file is called a document. And that workbook can contain one or more worksheets. And some people do refer to worksheets or a workbook as a spreadsheet. So let's see. Quickly, we'll flip over and take a look at a blank Microsoft Office workbook or worksheet. So you can see that the file consists of rows that are numbered, that are named with letters, beginning with A, going all the way through several rows. There are many rows. You can see it once we get through the initial alphabet of 26 columns, that the numbers begin to double, and that pattern repeats for several hundred, even thousand rows if necessary. Let's see. Down the left-hand side of the page, you have rows, which are numbered numerically 1 through, I think the maximum was around 65,000 some odd rows. So just to recap, up and down, or the horizontal, or excuse me, vertical, are columns that are named with letters, and the rows are the horizontal, or horizontal across the page, and they are named with numbers. Let's see. A cell, as we noted on the PowerPoint, is the intersection of a column and a row. So where column C and row 3 intersect, that gives you cell C3. Very simple. And you can see in the name box, the column identifier comes first, the row identifier comes second. So column C, row 3, C3 will be that cell name. Sometimes it's called a cell address. Cell reference is used a lot, but that is how we address the cells in Microsoft Excel, by the column and the row. Cell C3. The first cell in the spreadsheet, left-hand corner, is column A, row 1. That's cell A1. You can see in the name box it is indicated there as well, cell A1. Just one other thing about cells in general. Microsoft Excel uses cells and cell ranges, which is a group of cells that are adjacent to each other, in many calculations, formulas, functions, and those cell ranges are identified by the first cell in the range, which in this case is A1, and the last cell in the range, which in this case would be L12. So if I were to type out that cell range, it would look like this: A1 colon L12. So anytime you see one cell address or cell reference followed by a colon and then another cell name or cell reference, that is indicating a range of cells. So in this case, A1 through A12, or excuse me, L12, would be a range indicated by A1 colon L12. So that's how that's written. And you'll see that later on when we get into formulas and functions, you will see cell ranges used quite a bit. Okay, so let's see. Let's move on to the next slide. Some of this we've touched on already, but the cell with the dark border in the upper left-hand corner of the worksheet is the active cell, and what they say when they mean that is when you open Excel initially, the cell in the upper left-hand corner, A1, will be active. When you open a new workbook, it'll always be active. The first cell will be. And the black border around that cell is called the cell pointer. And just to make it a little easier to see, I'll click into a different cell. So whichever cell has the highlighted or the dark black border is going to be the active cell. In this case, it's cell E3. It's indicated by the fact that it's in column E and on row 3. That's how we come up with E3. So that's the cell pointer. Let's see, to make a cell active, you can simply click on it. You can use the arrow keys up and down, left and right, to move the cell pointer to another cell that if you wish to make another cell active, to navigate to that cell. And then every cell in the worksheet has a unique cell address, the intersection of the column and the row, as I've mentioned earlier. That's how we determine the cell address. And then when you first start Excel, as mentioned previously, the active cell in the new workbook is always going to be cell A1. Let's see. A few other items under the navigating a workbook topic. The name box shows the address of the selected cell. Demonstrated that a few minutes ago. The formula bar, just located above the column heading, shows the contents of the selected cell. And that's important when we get into using formulas and functions. And I'll demonstrate that in a minute. And then a group of cells that share boundaries and are selected is called a cell range. So we talked about a cell range. Let's flip back over, look at the name box. And this is the name box. It always will show you the highlighted or the active cell. One thing to note, if you have a range of cells selected, it's always going to show the beginning cell. You can see my range of cells selected here begins with E3 and ends in L. Let's make that L12 for consistency. And you can see the name box shows E3. It always shows the cell at the beginning of the range. Okay. If we just have one cell selected, it's going to display the cell address of that cell. The formula bar is here directly above the column headers, and it will display contents of what's in the cell. Where this becomes important, as you might expect, given that the name of this object in Excel is the formula bar, is when you begin to use formulas and functions. The reason why that is the formula bar will show you the formula or function that's present in the cell below, but the cell itself should show you the result of that function. For example, if I wanted to if I input a formula 2 plus 2, well, the cell shows the answer 4, which is the result of the formula, but in the formula bar, I can see what the actual formula in that cell is. Thus, the name formula bar. Okay, and let's see, we talked about the name box, the formula bar, cell range. Okay, so we're good to move on to the next slide. All right, so navigating a workbook, this slide is table G1. This is in your textbook. I'm not going to read this to you, but this is good information. It describes how to select a cell, row, column, cell range, worksheet, etc. So please make sure that you review that when you are going through your textbook. It's good information. Let's see, entering labels and values. Worksheets, spreadsheets contain data, and they contain text that indicates what that data is. So labels are merely text. They could also be numerical values, but typically labels are text that indicate what the following data is. And simply put, if I wanted to type, and I believe I've already got something typed out on sheet 1. I've got a simple, let's say payroll spreadsheet is what this is. I've got employees listed, I've got hours worked listed, rate of pay listed, gross pay listed, and now the reason why I know that this is gross pay, rate of pay, hours worked, and that these are employees are because I have labels. So these are the labels. If I took these out, or let's just say deleted them, now would I know who these people were, what these numbers represented? Probably not. So that's why labels are important. So these are labels that indicate what the data that follows is, what purpose it has. Okay, so that's the difference between a label and a value. Let's see. Entering text into Microsoft Excel is a little bit different if you've never done it before. You merely click on a blank cell if you want to enter. Let's enter a new employee by inserting a row. We're going to insert a new employee. If you want to type text in a cell, you just select the cell and type the text or value that you would like to enter. Now you can hit to input the text. You can use the tab key, you can use the enter key, or you can use an arrow key. In this case, I want to input more data to the right under the hours worked column, so I'm going to hit tab. It'll move my cursor over. We're going to say Russ works 40 hours too. We're going to say Russ makes $18 an hour, and we're going to calculate his gross pay in just a minute. But the point of the demonstration here is to input or enter that text. Click the cell, input the information, and you can press the tab key, enter key, or arrow key to actually enter the text into Excel. Now, what if I misspelled Russ's last name, or I was mistakenly typed in the last name for Russ? You would think that I would click the cell and begin typing. But when I do that, you'll notice that it immediately overtypes the data. So the way to edit text or a value in Microsoft Excel, there are a couple ways. Number one is double click the cell, and now you can see, okay, sorry, I had to pause for a minute. So if I double click the cell, you can see the cursor flashing. This means that Excel is now in edit mode, and then I can edit the text or the value in the cell. You can also enter you can place Excel into edit mode by using the F2 key. On most keyboards that will work. Some keyboards that have the function keys reprogrammed to perform different functions, that may not work for you. A standard keyboard, it should work. So you can double click the cell, or you can press the F2 key to get Excel into the enter mode. Okay, so that's how to enter data. Moving on to the next slide. Let's see, we've already touched on that label is text that describes data in the worksheet, and that values are numeric data that can be used in calculations. We also talk about edit mode a little further in the slideshow. We've touched on that already. So let's move on to using formulas. Formulas are probably the most important and most powerful part of Excel because it makes what could be very tedious or daunting work very easy. Formulas always start, the second bullet point, always start with an equal sign. Equal sign, if you don't begin your formula with an equal sign, your formula is not going to work because Excel doesn't know that it's a formula. By starting your formula with an equal sign, you are telling Excel, this is a formula. I expect you to calculate something to produce a result for me. Okay? So very important, you start your formula with an equal sign or your formula is not going to work ever. Let's see, the next bullet point is cell reference. Okay, cell references we've touched on a little bit already. That's a cell address such as E44, identifies the location of a value used in the calculation. What's one of the important things about Excel, or one of the nice things actually, is that you can use cell references in your formulas, which essentially make your formulas, or gives you the ability to copy your formulas, use the same formulas on different lines or rows or columns throughout your worksheet, and you don't have to retype the same formula over and over since you use the cell reference. Any time that you move a formula, i.e. copy or paste, Excel is going to update your formula using a relative cell reference, and I'll show you some examples shortly. Once the formula is copy and pasted. So we'll get into that. That may not sound like it makes much sense now, but I'll demonstrate some examples. All right, so formulas are mathematical operators. They use the order of precedence just like any other mathematical problem would. You know, the please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, for those of you that remember that from high school or maybe even middle school. There's a slide, I believe it's a couple slides from now. Yes, let's jump down there now. And in case you can't see, let's make this a little bigger. Parentheses, exponent, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. These are the order of operations that Excel uses to calculate any results or any answer based on a formula. And the acronym please excuse my dear Aunt Sally comes from the first letter of each word in that series. Parentheses, exponent, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So that's where that comes from. Okay, so that's table, looks like G2. You can find that in your textbook in Unit G. But back to formulas. As I mentioned a little earlier, you can copy and move formulas just like the other data in a worksheet. You can copy and paste it, cut and paste it. But when you move the formula, you want it to provide some value. And the way Excel does this is by relative cell referencing. So I'm going to attempt to explain that now. Excel automatically, when you copy a formula to a new cell or a new location, Excel automatically replaces the original cell references with the cell references that are in the same relative position as those in the original formula, called relative cell referencing. Okay, you can use a small black square at the bottom right corner of a cell known as the fill handle to drag the content of a cell to another adjacent cell. So, for example, I'm going to remove my gross pay, and I'm going to demonstrate this now. So, first thing I have to do is input a formula. So, to calculate gross pay, I need to multiply my hours worked times, which in this case we use the asterisk as the multiplication symbol, the rate of pay to determine the gross pay. So I've entered the formula beginning with my equal sign, and I want to multiply hours worked for Johnny, which are located in cell B3, 40, times the rate of pay for Johnny, which is located in cell C3. And now that I've got my formula entered into the cell, I hit enter or press enter, and it gives me my answer, $400. Now, I don't want to have to type that formula for every other employee here. Now, in this case, I only have 4 more employees, but what if I had a situation where I had hundreds or even thousands of employees? This is not something that I would want to type, thousands of times. So, what I can do is I can copy my formula down, and since Excel is going to use relative cell referencing for me, it will automatically update the cell references for each line as I copy my formula down the page. So, click the formula that I want to copy. I'm going to use the autofill handle, which is the black box at the bottom of this cell, the bottom right corner. You can see the black box right there. I'm hovering around. I'm hovering around using my cursor. So I'll hover my cursor over the black box. You can see that it turns into a black cross. I will click my left mouse button and drag my cursor down over the cells that I want to apply that formula to. When I get to the last one, I'll release, and you can see it's copied my formula down. And what has it changed? The cell reference. So for Johnny, his hours worked are in B3, his rate of pay is in C3, but for Amanda, her hours worked are in B4. Her rate of pay is in C4. And when I copied my formula down, and Excel uses relative cell referencing, you can see that it updated the formula to match B4 times C4. For Bill, B5 times C5. He's on row 5. It updated the formula for me. For Russ, B6 times C6. His hours are located in cell B6. His rate of pay is in C6. And then for Kathleen, B7 and C7. So that's what we mean by Excel using relative cell referencing when you copy a formula to a new location in a spreadsheet. Very handy. Also, the autofill or the fill handle that we use to drag the content of a cell to another adjacent cell is also very powerful. You can click and drag, or you can double click and it will copy the same information down for you. Whoops. Very useful. Okay, so that's formulas. Let's move on to AutoSum. AutoSum is a function. Now, the difference between a formula and a function, a formula is something that me or you would type up ourselves. Like, for example, cell B3 times C3 is a formula. So functions, they have names like sum, average, minimum, maximum, VLOOKUP, standard deviation. So automatically, if you see a formula that begins with an equal sign followed by a word in all caps like sum, you're going to know that you're looking at a function. Functions are pre-written formulas that are designed for particular types of calculations, most of which are either very commonly used, like adding numbers together, which is what the sum function does, or they're for very complex formulas, like say maybe a VLOOKUP or a standard deviation. Okay, so that's what functions are for. And to use a function, you simply type the function's name, beginning with an equal sign, sum, and then you give that function the inputs or the cell range that you want to apply that function to. In this case, I want to know the sum of gross pay for these employees, and I know that I've typed this in the average row, but just for this example, I want the sum of the gross pay for these employees. So I type equals sum, and then I input the range of cells that I want to add together, D3 through D7, enter, and now I've got my answer. You can see my answer would be $3,120, and when you look in the formula bar, you can see that I use the sum function. So when you use a function, all you have to do is give it the range of cells that you want to apply it to. No plus signs, no minus signs, nothing like that, no other mathematical operators. Just give it the range of cells, or what are known as the arguments, that you want to apply that function against. Okay? Let's see, we touched on functions, we touched on some, and then I just mentioned an argument is the information a function needs to make a calculation. So in this case, the sum function needs a range of cells to make the calculation, D3 through D7. Alright, so let's move on. Just a few more slides. Let's see, AutoSum functions that save time and help ensure accuracy. They are available for both simple calculations and extremely complex. I touched on that a minute ago. Each Excel function has a name that you usually see in all capital letters. We also talked about that. Average is one, date is one. There are hundreds of functions in the Microsoft Excel application. Some are very powerful and save a lot of time. Because the sum function is so commonly used, it has its own button on the Home tab known as the AutoSum button, which is located here. And there are also a few other very commonly used functions located here as well. Average is one, max is one, min is one. Those will return the maximum and minimum values in a list of values. For example, if I wanted to know the maximum value in this list of numbers, I would type in equals max D3 through D7, and it would return the highest value in that range of values, which is, you can see, 920. Same thing with minimum. I would type in, if I want to know the minimum number, I would type in the equal sign, minimum, open parentheses, give it the cell of range I wanted to apply the function against, close parentheses, enter. Now it gives me the minimum value in this range, which is, as you can see, 400. So that's how functions work. Alright, let's move on to changing alignment and number format. Okay, so Excel automatically left aligns text and right aligns values. Cell alignments can be changed using the buttons in the alignment group on the Home tab, just like you can rearrange text using the same alignment group from Microsoft Word. And you can also use the merge and center button to merge several cells into one and center the text in the merge cell. This is mostly for spreadsheet formatting for appearance purposes. Doesn't really provide any real benefit for calculations, which was what Excel is primarily used for. I'm not a big fan of merge and center because usually if you want to perform any calculations you typically have to undo the merge and center. So just a little bit of extra information there. Also, you can change the format of numbers to make your own worksheet easier to read using the buttons in the numbers group, and then you can also insert rows and columns in your worksheet if you need to add data, and when you do so, any cell references are updated to reflect the change, and we'll give a demonstration of that. So first let's talk about alignment. You can notice that, and I have adjusted this column so it's a bad example, but column A, the text, is all left aligned. All the text that is typed in this column is aligned to the left. Rate of pay, all of the values are right aligned. So those are the default settings for text alignment and value alignment. Now, if I wanted to, let's say, change the rate of pay, I don't want it left aligned. Let's say I want it all centered. I can use the buttons in the alignment group to do that. So I can left align the values, I can center the values, or I can align right, which is the default. So if I want to go back to the default, I would use the align right button. Same for text. If I wanted to align right instead of left, I could do that. I could do so using the features in the alignment group. Let's return it to the default. Now, also, you can align text or values in the top, middle, and bottom of a row. You can see that these cells or these rows are wider or taller than they need to be, and that is for the reason for that, as I'm about to demonstrate. If I wanted to bottom align the text in these rows, I would use the bottom align button, and you can see now all of my text is bottom aligned. If I wanted to top align the text, I could use the top align button, and it would move all the text to the top of the row or the top of the cell. So there's several different ways to align text and values for whatever. Most is for just personal preference, or unless you're going for some other type of visual appeal. The defaults will work for this class unless otherwise specified in a assignment or test. Let's see, we talked about alignment, merge, and center. If I wanted to title this spreadsheet payroll and merge and center that across all the columns, I could do that by selecting the cell that contains the text and the last cell that I wanted to include my merge and center. I would select the merge and center button, and now you can see it has centered the word payroll, and it has made the cells that used to be A1 through D1 into one cell, and that cell takes on the name of A1. Merge and center, that's again strictly for formatting purposes. Tends to get in the way if you're performing calculations. Alright, so that was slide 16. Let's take a look at 17 again. Formatting numbers. Let's see. Let's take a look at what we've got. So our numbers in this spreadsheet are hours, rate of pay, and gross pay. We know that rate of pay and gross pay, the unit of measure is dollars. So let's make those look like dollars. And I did that by clicking the accounting number format in the number group. So now that information is a little more meaningful, so we know that we're talking about dollars here. Okay. We can also change it to currency, which is another monetary type of format, slightly different from accounting. You can see the dollar sign is pushed to the right up against the values, and let's see, what was the other difference? Looks like the numbers are also right aligned. So just one additional format for the spreadsheet. Let's see. Alright, inserting a row. If I wanted to add an employee to my spreadsheet, let's insert in a different location. I want to add a new, let's just say Bob Smith. I can, let's add Bob's last name. I can right click to insert a new row or column, for that matter. I can select where I want to insert the new column or row, right click, and I can select insert, and it will insert a column or row, whatever I have highlighted. If I wanted to insert a column, I would right click, insert, and it would insert a new column in the location where column C is now. I can also select the row or column if I want to insert a new row, and I can go to the cells group, and I can insert rows. I can delete rows or cells. Format. Same thing with columns. I can insert columns, or I can delete columns, or I can format them however I wish. So you can always add and remove columns and rows from a spreadsheet. In this case, let's go ahead and add Bob's information. We're going to say Bob makes $20 an hour, and we're going to copy our formula down for Bob using the fill handle. And you can see it adjusted the formulas of the cell references, because before Russ was located on row 6, so his cell references were B6 and C6 to calculate his gross pay. But since we inserted a row, all the cell references were updated by one row that were below where I inserted the new row, and Bob is now B6, C6, and his gross pay is located in D6. Alright, let's see. Enhancing a worksheet. We demonstrated that with some of the formatting. Page layout view can be used to show headers, and also you can also apply cell styles. I'll let you go through the tutorial and see those examples. Those are better done on your own than me trying to explain them to you. And then lastly, previewing and printing a worksheet. One thing I do want to point out is we're not going to print really much of anything in this class, particularly the online class. There's no need for you to print anything. You won't submit anything printed. If a tutorial or assignment asks you to print something, there's really no need to. Just want to make that clear. But to show you, let's see, we want to print, preview, and in Microsoft Office 13 you will use the File tab. You will scroll down to the print, print on the menu. When you click print, you will see the print preview on what they call the backstage view on the right hand portion of your screen in Microsoft Excel 2013, but it will look very similar. You can make page setup changes. You can change the orientation from portrait to landscape, like so. Let's see. You can change margins, header, footer, and things of that nature. And that is done on the backstage view on the File tab in Microsoft Office 2013. So that is all for this lecture. I'll post this to Tegrity and it'll be on YouTube, so you can find it in either place. And if you have questions, please let me know.